Hi, Michaela Lafrac here. The podcast you are about to listen to has been edited for clarity and brevity. This is Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Classical music makes many of us think of old world Europe and white men with white wigs. But contemporary classical music is a diverse and ever-changing genre of its own, especially in the melting pot that is America. Johnny Gandelsman is one of the most renowned classical musicians of our day. He's a Grammy Award-winning violinist who plays with the genre-bending group Brooklyn Rider, and he's currently an artist in residence at Dartmouth College. During the pandemic, Gandelsman, like many musicians, was stuck at home in the Hudson Valley. All his public performances were canceled. That's when he had an idea for a project that he would eventually call This Is America. He reached out to around 24 composers living in the United States, and he asked them to create something inspired by the moment we were living through. One of the composers he reached out to was Kojiro, or Umezaki, a Dartmouth alum and a friend. This year, the Hopkins Center for the Arts at Dartmouth is presenting the entire This Is America anthology for the first time, including 4 Hop commissions. Johnny Gandelsman is performing at Dartmouth and venues all around the region. Before a performance on February 6th, I had the chance to sit down with Johnny and in front of an audience in Hanover, New Hampshire. We're going to play that conversation for you today, as well as some of their music. Today's show is pre-recorded, so we won't be taking any calls or emails. And with that, let's go to my conversation with Johnny Gandelsman and Kojiro Umezaki. We'll start with a bit of music by Clarice Assad called Oh. Johnny, let's talk about this massive piece of work, This Is America. It's about as diverse as the country itself. But many of the folks who are involved in this project, yourself included, were born in other places and now call America home. Could you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what your earliest cultural influences were?
Sure. Thank you. So I was born in Russia, in Moscow, into a family of musicians. Both of my parents are professional musicians, and then my older sister, 4 years older, is a violinist as well. And I started playing when I was 4 years old. I copied everything my sister did. So I walked around behind her with these 2 very large pencils, kind of mimicking the motions of playing the violin. My parents thought, oh, looks like he wants to play the violin, and so I got one of those. And it was childhood, kind of deeply rooted and very classical focus. My family moved to Israel when I was 12. And I continued my studies there, and I came here to go to school in 1995. I went to school in Philadelphia. It was the first time I was, away from home, living by myself. And I guess soon after getting here, I started to diverge off the path that was predetermined.
What did your parents think of that divergence?
Well, it took a while for them to be on board, I would say. It was just, some of it was just teenage rebellion, but I did discover that the biggest joy I was getting out of playing music was in situations where I was working with friends. And I know it sounds silly that was a discovery that I made when I was 18, but that's what happened. I left school, in 1999. I moved to New York. Soon afterwards, I met Ko in Washington, D.C., where the Silk Road Ensemble was one of the groups kind of in residence for the Folklife Festival in 2002 on the Mall.
And for folks who haven't been to the Folklife Festival in DC, just imagine the sweatiest you could possibly be and surrounded by great art, but is this yearly festival
in July.
In July on the National Mall. But that's where you two meet. Ko, tell me a little bit about, well, first, before we get deeper into your meet cute, about yourself growing up. You grew up in Tokyo, is that right?
Yeah, I grew up in Tokyo. Let's see. This is the way I explain myself. I'm a product. I'll keep it short, but
let's do it.
But I really think that I'm a product of the Second World War, and the reason is my father, who was from the southern part of Japan, he lived in a place called Minamata, which is a city that is also became infamous for some other things, but it's right across the bay from Nagasaki, and he saw the mushroom cloud in Nagasaki. And my mother, who is from the southern part of Denmark, her father didn't come back after going to war in 1944. So somewhere, trying to reconcile a fractured world allowed them to meet in Spanish class in Ohio. Yeah, so they're both international students who met there. So that's where I come from. Everything I do, and including my relationship that I've developed with playing with Johnny and the way that I play and think about my instrument, I think is rooted in that particular context.
And tell us about this instrument of yours.
Yeah, it's called a shakuhachi, and it literally means 1 foot 8 inches. But there are different sizes of them, so I'm still trying to figure that math out a little bit. And it's a Buddhist instrument, although there's an earlier history of it coming from China when Japan was trying to figure out how to bring in ideas for setting up a country during the Tang Dynasty. It is a tool for practicing meditation, not necessarily for playing music per se, but there's a much more complicated political history behind that instrument.
And it looks something like a recorder.
Yeah.
But I hear it takes a lifetime to really master. It's a notoriously difficult instrument.
Yes, absolutely. My mother reminds me that 1 year after I started at the recital, it looked like I was playing, but there was no sound coming out of the instrument. Yeah.
So when you two met, you come from different backgrounds, you play different instruments. What sparked? What felt like, this is a person who I could work with?
The Silk Road gang, the Silk Road group of musicians, it's been a group of colleagues and who became friends, like lifelong friends, so, and we discovered so much about each other's backgrounds, each other's traditions, and then one of the best things about it was that there was this give and take. There was someone there, very kind, that would take you by the hand and just kind of lead you in and open the door and say, "This is what I do. Do you want to participate?" That just built a tapestry of experiences and memories that we still draw upon. This is like 22 years ago, and those friendships are for life, and they kind of provide, a richness to what we do.
Set the stage for us for the inception of This Is America. When did this idea of creating this expansive project first start to percolate for you?
When I first started thinking about doing something, it did not have a name, and it was not going to be an anthology. It didn't have any grand things I was going for, but it was summer of 2020. I was for a moment a resident of New Hampshire, up in the White Mountains region, where my family and I kind of escaped New York City, where we used to live in Brooklyn. In 2020, the city was, getting shut down that day or about to be shut down, and my partner said, "Okay, we're packing the car and we're leaving," and took the kids, went to New Hampshire, and we were there we thought we were going to be there for a very short time. We ended up being there for 6 months. It was just a very strange experience to be there because, well, first of all, I'm a city person. I've always lived in cities, and so like nature and I have a difficult relationship. And then, yeah, and we were on this beautiful little lake in an old house that my partner's grandparents used to live in. Very safe. My kids didn't have to wear masks for months. Didn't see anybody really. But then, through our phones and through the radio and the news, we were kind of watching as the world was just going up in flames, literally and figuratively, with COVID and police brutality and fires in the West Coast, and then there was the election, and then we were together, we were safe, we had in a way like a bonding thing with our family, but also we were so isolated from everything, that like our friends and our community and our home, and it was strange to just be sitting around and thinking, I don't know, I was thinking, what is there, can somebody do anything, can I do anything about any of the stuff that's going on? When we tried to do things like play a concert online and raise money for this or raise money, like we tried, there was I think the music community, the creative community at large, was trying to do things suddenly online. It was like a big push to do things, but that was also exhausting. I remember that. Yeah, anyway, so this idea came to mind, which was, everyone is sitting around at home right now. Maybe I could commission some new music to be written for the violin, and I could ask composers to just reflect on this time that we're all experiencing. And that's kind of how it started. I keep lots of lists on my phone, and so I have a giant list of people that I would love to work with, and I just started going through the list and adding names. Co's piece was one of the first ones that was actually like, okay, this is actually happening, and it was great. And it really helps when you're writing emails like that to say, we already have the Hopkins Center on board, and it makes it easier for other people to jump on board. And it grew from there to, over 20 commissions. And then just after that is when things started coming back, and I started looking at like the wealth of the material that was coming, I realized that it was kind of like a slice of time. This work was representing like a small slice of time, and also a small slice of the creative output in this country. 24 is very little. My list is very long. But then it kind of led itself to this idea that maybe it's an anthology for the time.
That's Johnny Gandelsman, alongside the musician Ko Umezaki. We're going to pause here for a quick break. Stay with us, because when we come back, we're going to hear more of their music and learn about Ko's inspirations for the piece he wrote for This Is America. You're listening to Vermont Edition. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Today on the show, we're listening to a conversation I recorded earlier this month in Hanover, New Hampshire. I sat down with the renowned violinist Johnny Gandelsman, an artist in residence at Dartmouth College. We discussed his anthology called This Is America. We were also joined by Dartmouth alum and shakuhachi player and composer Kojiro Umezaki, who contributed to This Is America. Today's show is pre-recorded, so we won't be taking any calls or emails. Ko, when you first heard from Johnny, when you got his text or his email, his phone call saying, "Hey, do you want to be a part of this thing I'm putting together?" What was going on in your life at the time? Were you in a similar space of isolation?
Yeah, I was. So I live in Los Angeles now, and pretty much the way that Johnny characterized, I think, what a lot of us were going through in music, and there's been such a shift. I think we were having this discussion, I think, last night, but there's been such a shift towards recorded music, I think, right, in recent years, and sort of we can discuss the value of what recorded music has become now, especially to us who create it. That the live stuff just stopped, and that's a pretty scary thing, I think. I think there's a freelancers. It doesn't have to be music, but there's a freelancer's mentality. I think we can all relate where, if you're a freelancer, and when, in particular, like if I'm allowed to include myself into your world, but as like Johnny is, he's a musician, doesn't have a, necessarily, doesn't, play in an orchestra or things or something like that. There's this, like, you got to say yes to everything, right? And just, and there's a halt in all of that. That happens, I think.
Cancellations,
yeah,
like
exactly.
one by one.
Concerts get canceled
falling,
and all that,
yeah,
and
like
that's
dominoes.
a psychologically very, very difficult place to be. I'm fortunate because I teach at the University of California, Irvine, so I had that work to do, and my work involves some technology as well, and so I could sort of assist a little bit in terms of trying to get all the network stuff happening. Through small little projects that happened online during that period, but definitely because my friends are part of a network of people like Johnny's, that it's tough to just to absorb that a little bit, psychologically.
I'm curious to hear from both of you how that period of time changed how you thought about your art. When you started, perhaps playing music for the first time in a while, I'm assuming solely for yourself, or for a different type of audience, maybe an audience you couldn't see directly in front of you. I talked to a lot of musicians during the pandemic who really struggled to pick up their instruments for a while because that relationship with the audience had been severed in a way. Johnny, how did you think about the violin and your relationship with your own music creation?
Yeah. I barely played the violin, honestly, during that time. It was hard, and online, there was the online performance thing where you would go in and to a studio, and there were presenters around the country that wanted to like support the artist and say, okay, can you create a video, and we'll show it, and we'll pay you a fee, and we'll share it with our audiences. And And a lot of that was good, but the experience of being in the studio by yourself wearing a mask sometimes, because for a variety of reasons, one could find themselves wear a mask. That was incredibly also isolating, and I think sometimes musicians can fall into the side of where you might take the audience for granted. But if that ever happened to you, the pandemic definitely took care of that. You can't, there's no way, because even having one person in the room just changes completely what you're doing and why you're doing it. So that's probably the biggest thing. Yeah.
Ko, were you still playing music?
Music? What's that? No. No, actually not. I think I was just trying to figure out, I think like all of us, it's what can we do in this situation? And so I think mostly I was trying to help out with more on the technology side of things and trying to see, where we can take the existing technology and come up with something that would be meaningful at that time.
So when you first started talking to Johnny about this project, what inspired the work that you would then go on to create, Breathe?
Right. So the instrument that I play, like I said, was really kind of its most interesting historical period is when it was used for meditative practices, and so it seemed like it was a natural thing to think about breathing, because there was a paradox, right, during that period where the actual life-giving, force that we have as humans, breath, was actually also potentially causing, the transmission of the opposite, right? And so that paradox to me seemed very, very strong, that I wanted to address. And just to be really simple about it, I would say that the other element of it was, in addition to the pandemic, we have, among many, one example being, the killing of George Floyd and the forcible denial of breath in some ways.
I can't breathe.
Yeah. Seemed like, like Johnny was saying, it's a snapshot or a slice of time which was the kind of the homework assignment, right? It's to think about 2020, I think that particular year. And so those two things seem to come together for at least the concept behind the piece. Yeah.
Johnny, did you start to see common themes emerge as you spoke to the artists that you were working with?
I sent out the prompt, but I didn't ask what people were going to come back with. Mm-hmm. So until I got the scores, I for the most part, I really had no idea what people were thinking about writing. And actually, some just chose not to be explicit about it at all, which is also great. There's a lot of nature, and there's a lot of air. There's a lot of use of harmonics to, I think, create the feeling of space, stillness, time, expressing time. But there was all sorts. I mean, there was, well, first of all, people who wrote for the project come from very different backgrounds, different ages, different interests, like genre interests. Some people came from the jazz world, folk, kind of roots world, very traditional, classical, very experimental world. So, it was just great to see what people are into, And that's my really biggest takeaway from this project is I think I'll never be bored if I can do this kind of thing more. It's just because there's so many people who are doing so many amazing things. And if I have a chance to be a small part of bringing it to life somehow, that I'll never be bored.
I imagine it was a trip to work with people from such different backgrounds and personal backgrounds and also musical backgrounds. I imagine that when you started receiving some of these works that you weren't getting, just neatly printed out stacks of sheet music with, a written out artist statement.
Right.
Did you get some responses and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this?
Yes.
Tell us about some.
Some of them are on tonight's program.
Was it him?
No. I mean, I needed I needed a guide into many of the works. I needed the composer to take me in and kind of like show me around. This is the kitchen, this is the bed, and there's a piece on the program tonight by Nick Dunstan, who's an amazing jazz bass player, and when he sent me the score. It was all handwritten. It was one page. There were some instructions on a separate page, and then I looked at it, and I knew that some things were depicting seconds of time, and besides that, I really didn't know much about it. Like I could not read it, and then he very kindly asked a friend of his who is a violinist, who is who speaks the language, to make instructional videos for me.
Oh, wow.
So she went through the pieces. She's like, okay, bar one, or not bar, box one, left corner, sounds like this. Over here, sounds like this. And, so that, for example. Another piece is by one of the youngest composers in the collection, Maya Miro Johnson, who I think is maybe 22 now. She wrote it, 3 years ago. So she was 3 years younger. And the second and the fourth movement of a 5-movement suite were just a text, and it was instructions. And I kind of was reading them. There were instructions for someone who would be taking a Gaga dance class, which is an improvisatory dance class, right? And it comes from her experience of when, during the pandemic, or right before the pandemic, she was in an accident, and as part of her PT, she discovered Gaga dance class. And during the pandemic, she was taking this class on Zoom along with hundreds of people from around the world, which is kind of like an unbelievable amount of little squares doing things. But so the movement or the instruction, it just reads as somebody who's leading a class, right? And then my job is to turn that into sound, which I will attempt to do today. If you want to interpretively dance, please. And so there were. I mean, one piece came back as a poem set to music, to guitar. It was basically a poem/song, and so it didn't really work on the violin. So I had to figure out how to plunk the guitar. So I had to figure that out. And there was one song, the one just song, guitar and voice. So I had to do that, and I'm not a singer. So it stretched my comfort level quite a bit.
Well, I want to hear more about why you wanted to do that, because you are a virtuosic violinist. You've been playing your entire life. Why not continue down this path that you have been walking, this path that you have been so celebrated for, and instead learn to play guitar and sing?
Yeah. Well, I can't say that I actually learned either of those things, but trying them was fun. And I don't know that I've, this path that you mentioned, I don't know that it's been a clear one for me. Still trying to figure it out. And there's so many people who are already on the path. It's pretty busy, So I don't know. I just, as I said, the most joy I get is out of playing music, a lot of, not most, a lot of it has to do with situations where I'm either surrounded with friends or getting to, learn something about someone, and playing their music is a great way to do that. I also like to play a lot on my own, but that's a separate conversation. We don't have to go there.
Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, totally. And I think, Johnny, it's just, I'm going to say something pretty simple, but because you value like the relationships, I think, when in your work, right? That you like through these works, the collection of 20 some works that you have, in a way, because it also is supposed to reflect this period of isolation, it's like it points to like wanting to inhabit or be in these really personal spaces with individuals, because you want that connection in some ways too, as because you value relationships so highly, I think, maybe. And that's what, what's cool about how, hey, you're playing guitar and singing, that kind of sort of mentality, I think, comes across to me in that collection of works.
Thank you. I didn't want to limit people to tell them like specifically what to do, and definitely didn't want to tell people what not to do. But also I'll say, I mentioned this in the class earlier today, but I also learned that like many people, I am like scared of the unknown, terrified, really. So when I was getting these new works that I had really no idea how to approach, my first reaction was just fear, and like wanting to kind of reject it. But I knew that that was initial, and then I had to get kind of through it, and I'm still working through it. I still have those experiences, but I mean, that just happens in the world, but it's a good muscle to exercise.
Yeah. We have to take one more quick break. But before we do, here's what we're working on for Vermont Edition tomorrow. Now, you've probably heard about the drug Ozempic and its cousins, Wegovy and Mounjaro. The FDA's approved them as treatment for type 2 diabetes, but they are also used by celebrities and increasingly regular folks to lose weight. Here in Vermont, some doctors want the state to require insurance to cover the drugs. Tomorrow, we'll speak with Vermont's Health Commissioner, Dr. Mark Levine, and other health professionals about how these drugs work. Have you considered taking one of these weight loss drugs? What are your questions or your thoughts about weight control? Email us at vermontedition@vermontpublic.org, and be sure to join us Tuesday at noon. More of our foray into contemporary classical music when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lefrak. Today on the show, we are listening to a conversation I recorded earlier this month in Hanover, New Hampshire. I sat down with the Grammy Award-winning violinist Johnny Gandelsman. He's an artist in residence at the Hopkins Center for the Arts at Dartmouth College, and he has an anthology called This Is America. We were also joined by a contributor to that anthology, Dartmouth alum and renowned shakuhachi player Kojiro Umezaki. The two performed a concert later that evening, and we've interspersed some of the music here. Let's get back to our conversation. Do you feel like you've gained a new understanding of America from working on this project, This Is America? So I feel like we could use some guidance right now.
That's above my pay grade. But I can just say, I've always, I came here when I was 17. I really fell in love with the place, and the melting pot idea is not just idea. It really like feeds the thing for me, and so like defining. This is America. Again, like it sounds grand, but it's such a small slice of what it is, and I'm just discovering, actually what is it? and my next project is twice as big that I'm thinking about, but just because there's more to know, you know. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, that's a good excuse for me to ask you, Ko, about what it's like to be back here at Dartmouth. You went to graduate school here.
I did, yeah.
And taught here for a bit as well.
I taught a visiting sort of person, and I taught some of the classes to some undergraduates. It's great, and I just also want to mention that I'm really grateful and thankful for actually 2 commissions now from the Hopkins Center, both related to Johnny. But I'm really, really super grateful for that. I guess I did okay here at Dartmouth. I don't know. It's okay for me to come back. But yeah, no, it's been a very. I've had a chance to come back here over the years. I see some of my friends from those days. Yes, when I was a grad student, and one of them, Michael Casey, over there, who led the music department as well, and came back to teach and transformed that program that we were in. It's home, essentially. It's home. Yeah.
Yeah. As we wrap up and prepare to head over to this concert, I'm wondering if each of you could give us a bit of a preview of what we'll be hearing, or maybe you have the rare chance to kind of shape the minds of the people who will be listening to your music. So what headspace should we be approaching this with, or what headspace were you in, Ko, when you were preparing this piece that you would like us to be thinking of?
Yeah, okay, so
picture the world's greatest piece of music.
Yes, exactly. It's going to be awesome, and Johnny is so great that you can't go wrong. No, which is true. But so can I do it this way, because I had a request?
Let's do it.
Not that we're taking requests up here, but if I say something like echo, 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 Ekaterinburg, this piece is about, at least the piece that that I wrote for Johnny is about really thinking about also where we are with artificial intelligence these days, and the system that I built for Johnny to play through, which he'll do it with a recorded version of it this time, is a kind of an echo system, but it plays back things that you've already played before. So it's pattern matching. So in that sense, it's old school AI kind of coming back. And the reason why I picked that is because if you think about old school AI, it's pattern matching. So you think about, well, what's similar? What's most similar, right? And let's play that back. So it's not like an echo that's a perfect echo, but it's something that's similar that keeps coming back that you've played into it. But then I started thinking, well, why do we put more value on similar, right? Because I think in the arts we can hold both difference and similarity together in the same space and find something meaningful in that. And so when listening to the piece, I think maybe tonight that, especially Johnny's version of this, just the idea of holding those two things in the same space, sometimes similar, sometimes different, and letting sort of like a non-verbal sonic sort of expression of what it means to actually just sit in that space between similarity and difference, and how they can actually be in dialogue with each other and coexist. Maybe that would be great.
It's beautiful. Johnny, what do you have to add?
Well, I think tonight there's 8 works, and I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard to summarize. What you will hear. I guess I would just put out a wish that maybe if you're able to put aside the "is this good or bad" kind of thinking, and just maybe ask like, is this interesting or surprising or at all memorable? I would be really happy if that kind of was the state of mind that you went into, because I don't know if you like all the pieces. I don't know if you like any of the pieces, but that doesn't. It's not about. I don't think it's about liking. It's really like, it's about this person who put their heart and soul and a lot of time into expressing themselves. And it's actually now, we're sort of past COVID, even though so many people have COVID now. But we're also back, like it's 4 years later, we're getting into this election cycle again. And it's interesting to me to go back to these pieces now. Because there's something, and at the moment where I was learning them, I was like in it. It was right in front of me, and now that's a little bit of time has passed, and some things have changed, and some things haven't. It's just, I don't know. There's just more shades in the music for me, But I'm just happy that you'll be there and you'll experience it, and if you're really interested, a 4-hour album of new music for violin is available at the concert. You can buy it or stream it or do whatever you want with it. It's a really good doorstop.
Johnny Gandelsman, Ko Umezaki, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Special thanks to the folks at the Hopkins Center for the Arts at Dartmouth for partnering with us. You can find information about the music we played during this hour on the Vermont Edition page of vermontpublic.org. That event and this type of show are kind of new for us, and we'd love to hear what you thought. You can send us an email with your feedback to vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. Our show is produced by Tendra Meyer, Andrea Lorian, and Daniela Fierro. Our theme music was composed by Myra Flynn. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch up again soon.